Hey, it's Mike from Go Cell Phone Repair, and we'll be starting the Thursday evening live stream in just a few minutes. Going to give everyone a chance to show up. So in the meantime, here is an iPhone 6 Plus being converted into a red housing, and I'll see you in about 10. All right, let's get this thing started. Today we got some more interesting stuff to talk about. We have new features that will be available on Android P. We've got the question as to whether or not the next iPhone will have a notch, or whatever the next iPhone may be. We have a right to repair bill finally introduced in California, which makes me proud because I am a Californian. So we're seeing this pop up throughout more and more states, and quite a bit of interesting controversy surrounding that whole idea, and I think a lot of misunderstanding as to what that means, but we'll go over that as well. Happy Women's Day. If there is a woman out there, if there's a woman in your life, make sure that you've told her Happy Women's Day. I know a lot of people are saying, hey, didn't we just have Valentine's Day? But, you know, I think this one, maybe you can get by without a card. I'm not sure. If not, I'm going to be in trouble. But I did do the dishes earlier, so I will be adding timestamps to this video. So for anyone who's watching the replay, within 24 hours from the time these live streams are recorded, I always put timestamps down in the video description. That way you can kind of click and go from one topic to another. You don't have to sit through the whole thing if you don't have the time to, or you can just play it in the background as you go about your day. And I want to remind everyone, if you enjoy the information on this live stream, please remember to hit the like button. You can share this on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you'd like to, and hit that subscribe button and the bell notification icon if you would like to be notified whenever we publish something new on this channel. All right, let's get it going. Yeah, so I'm not sure what happened with that, guys, at the beginning, that weird color bleed over thing that was happening. I just made that video earlier, and normally I don't have any problem streaming on here, so whatever that is, hopefully it doesn't show up during the stream at any other point. So hello to everyone. Johnny Chang, Nate, you made it. Also, another media player, MPV or SM player. Yeah, here's the thing, when you're using, Android Popcorn, when you're using OBS, you are restricted to certain types of media players, and VLC seems to be one of the ones, at least, that's supported for Apple, so that's what I've been using at the moment. And it looks like I have plenty of resources, so I don't know what that's about. Now, the Essential phone and another company called Vivo make the front camera pop up from the edge. I actually saw that, and I want to say that there was also a laptop at MWC that had that same little feature. You press on a button and the front-facing camera pops up, and that's one of the things that people have kind of been talking about with this when it comes to the whole notch idea. And you know, I don't think anyone really sees that happening with Apple. I mean, we could be wrong. That could potentially happen, and if it did, imagine the number of repairs that we would see for broken pop-up cameras, which is what I would think is going to happen with those other devices. You know, if you have any moving parts, those are typically the things that go bad over time. So, I mean, anything's possible, but with the number of the number of pieces of hardware that are built up into that notch, it seems really like there would be a big challenge to get rid of that. And I'm interested to hear what people think as far as whether that would even matter. You know, I think a lot of people fall into the category of, you know, if there's a notch, there's a notch. If there isn't, whatever, you know, I'll get used to it if I have to. I think if you're a die-hard Apple enthusiast and you did choose to upgrade to the newest phone, which there was, you know, a lot of talk about how people weren't really willing to spend all that money this time around. You know, there are quite a few people who are fans of Apple and who bought every iPhone that came out, and it said that this time the reason that they didn't upgrade again this year as they had previously was mainly because of the cost and the fact that their old iPhone was working just fine. So I wonder what kind of message that sends to the company when you say, if my old device is still working fine, I don't really have an incentive to upgrade to the newest one that you're selling. I think that gets kind of, that would be cause for concern at least. N95 were pretty sturdy as they were built with the sliding screen. I remember those. I used to love those Nokias. In fact, I want to say I saw one. Nah, it's been a few years. It has been quite a while, but they were pretty durable. But that's kind of what Nokia was known for, right? And when it comes to Apple or Samsung, we know that their phones don't tend to do well when it comes to, you know, being dropped, especially if you look at something like the iPhone 10 or iPhone 8 and 10 that have glass on the front and back again like the 4S's do. But who knows? Hopefully you don't get a weirdo to come in, Nate. Wow. I don't know what time it is where you're at, but yeah, it's probably one of those ones that shows up like at 5 minutes before the store closes. I've been guilty of that before. I try to avoid it though. I really do. Hey, Greg M., how are you? but the thinnest and lightest phone ever. Yeah, and that seems to be the argument from manufacturers on the next topic that I want to get into shortly when it comes to the whole right to repair thing. But yeah, this notch deal, you know, I'm looking at the phone. I don't have the iPhone 10, and the notch really didn't discourage me. It wasn't a big factor in my buying decision whatsoever. I'm sure there's some people out there who didn't like the idea of the notch, but for the most part, anyone I talk to who is a fan of iOS and who likes their iPhones, it's like, yeah, if it has a notch, whatever, we'll get used to it. And then, you know, you have people on both sides. You can have people that are going to hate any change that gets made on any phone that comes out because they get used to what they like. And then you're going to have people on the other side who, when their company or their brand does something different, they're going to embrace it no matter what. And that group, that, you know, that fringe group, or the people who are way on that side of I love everything that Apple does, the notch is the greatest thing in the world, if, and this is a big if, because it sounds, you know, pretty up in the air at this point. If they change over and get rid of the notch, I would be willing to predict that those same people that think the notch is the greatest thing in the world right now, if that notch disappeared, they would think that was now the best thing in the world, and they'd be so happy that the notch went away. But for most people, I don't really think it's a huge deal. You know, I haven't talked to anyone who said, I really just can't stand the look of that notch. It changed my mind. And, you know, making use of the space by putting the time and the battery meter and stuff at the top, I mean, it makes sense, right? And it's seeing all... The thing that got me about this was the irony of all of these Android devices that are now going to be building in something that looks similar to a notch. And apparently Apple has no sort of copyright. They have no sort of patent or anything on the notch design because we have all these other companies that are doing the same thing. It strikes me as just pure irony that it would be so funny if they did it on one model and then immediately switched over to something that was completely different and didn't have a notch at the top, which I think is unlikely when you consider all the hardware that's built into the top of that thing. And I actually had an image here. Let me pull it up real quick because I want to talk about the one person. You know, if you Googled, is Apple getting rid of the notch, you'll see all sorts of information about how everyone says the notch is going away. It's either going to be gone at the end of the year or by 2019, there won't be a notch anymore. And then there's, you know, this one lone article up towards the top of the search results from Mashable. And this person is saying, no, the notch is absolutely not going away. In fact, let me just bring up the headline at least so you can see it here. Let's get our display capture up to the top. So, oops, let's move this. Okay, so this is from Mashable, and the guy said, Mashable, not Matchable, and he says, let's get real, the iPhone notch isn't going away. And he points out to, you know, some pretty good reasons here, and that's probably a little small for you guys to read, but if you can't, I'm going to at least enlarge my screen, hopefully, so that I can see. But, you know, there's a number of different pieces of hardware up at the top. Shoot, I can't even see it at this point. Let's see if we have a list here that we can go through. We actually have, let's see, can we do this? Maybe we can do something here to make that work better. There we go. So we have an infrared camera, a flood illuminator, an proximity sensor, ambient light sensor, obviously speaker, microphone, front camera, dot projector. So with all this hardware built into that notch, it would take more, obviously, than just having, you know, something like a retractable camera, because you've got to figure out a way to get all this other stuff to work. So really, it seems like the only options are A, come out with some crazy advanced technology where you can actually put this stuff behind the display and still have it function, which seems highly unlikely, right? Or maybe conceal some of it and shrink the notch down a bit, but the real other alternative would be drilling holes into the display. So whether it's OLED or LCD, that seems unlikely as well. You know, it would kind of make sense, I think, if you had, you know, an edge-to-edge display with just a few dots, you know, right in the middle, one for the speaker, one for the camera, one for the sensor. But it seems unlikely that you would have a series of holes in your screen at the top rather than not just having a cutout shape like this. So, you know, when I first saw this article, I thought it was interesting that he's actually saying exactly the opposite of what pretty much all these other publications are talking about. But it all kind of comes down to this one source in, I want to say it's Korea, who released this story and said, you know, Apple's going to be getting rid of the notch, and then everyone kind of jumped on the bandwagon and started republishing this information saying the notch is going away. And I'm not sure we really have a good indication that that's happening, and I'm still also curious to hear if anyone cares, really, whether there's a notch on the iPhone or not. I don't think it's going to be a big factor for most people, but I guess we'll just really have to wait and see, because that's one of the things that Apple does when they have new designs. Now, aside from all the leaks that we get every year, I'd say that most of the time what we see that's, I don't want to say definitive, but a stronger indication of what a new phone's design is going to be is when we have vendors who are pitching new cases and new tempered glass and new screen protectors and things for phones that haven't been released yet. Because if they have these things available in quantity, you would assume that they have to be producing them based on some information that they got ahead of time. It also does make sense that Apple, for the last few years has kind of been, not making dramatic changes that often, because when you do, you've got to go in and you've got to set up equipment to manufacture these housings, these displays, redesign the inside of the phone, and something like this would be pretty radical as far as going from a notchless display to one that functions with Face ID, which we have every indication that that's not going away. That's going to still be there. So for that to be retained, it doesn't seem like there will be a lot of other options, at least, none that come to mind. Did Mike mention last time that there was an oversupply of iPhone 10 screens in the inventory of Samsung? I did read that, Johnny, and I from a few different sources, and this is all, again, debatable, of course, but most of the sources that you look at will say that the iPhone 10 or iPhone X, whichever you prefer, did not reach the sales expectations that Apple had projected. And so ahead of time, Samsung had manufactured all of these displays for a lot of phones that haven't been sold yet. So if that's true, and it seems to be the case, then yes, supposedly Samsung was scrambling to find other places to sell these screens to, which is another strange thing to think about. I mean, if it's already produced and it fits the form factor of an iPhone 10, then what else are you going to do with it? You're going to have someone else manufacture a phone that looks pretty much like an iPhone 10, right? It's not like you can go in and change the shape of that display. But yes, I definitely did mention that. And who knows? Unfortunately, they don't give us all of their behind-the-scenes information. Just take the notch, as some people take eyebrows. Some have it thicker than others, exactly. Or maybe Apple will remove all those sensors. Wouldn't be the first time they removed a feature. Oh, man. You brought up a good point, Real World. Apple could remove Face ID and sell you a dongle so that you could re-enable that feature again, right? Actually, in all seriousness, there is a dongle for the home button. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. It plugs into the bottom of the phone on the iPhone 10. Obviously, it's not OEM, but it restores your home button and your 3.5 millimeter headset jack just by plugging into the Lightning port. Not something I would recommend for anyone. It sounds, there would be some novelty to that, to having a portable dongle-enabled home button. But obviously, if it's not made by Apple for Apple, I could imagine a lot of things might go wrong with that. And this is one of the ones that I just saw the other day, where they were showing a fan. You've seen these before. These USB fans that plug into the bottom of a Lightning port. They normally plug into a USB port, but these are made to plug into a Lightning port and power a fan, so that when people are taking selfies, I would imagine on Instagram or whatever else, it'll give them the effect that their hair is being blown by the wind, right? Well, that is a real quick way to kill your charging system on your iPhone. So I would suspect if those sell very well, we'll probably see a lot of those coming in for repair. Once we get to the point where we can replace that new Hydra chip or whatever it is that controls the charging or protects the charging system pretty much on the iPhone 10, if and when we get there. If they cannot, iPhone 7, what am I talking about here? Why can they not distribute all those sensors evenly alongside the edge of the screen instead of a big bunch tucked into the notch? I suppose that would be an option. I think that it might be less comfortable to hold the phone in landscape mode. Excuse me. Where most people are used to holding their phones upright, especially when they're taking selfies and stuff. I mean, it could certainly work. It might be a tough sell, but if it was Apple's idea, it might be considered courageous. So yeah, you never know. Johnny, you should write them an email and make that suggestion. Because they give too much space for drivers, It's like they assume all parts of the device will expand so they give room in between the display and sensors. I wonder if some of that space on the inside, because I remember we had this conversation about how, excuse me guys, about how there was not enough room for the 3.5 millimeter headset jack, which, you know, if you want to tell me that on the standard size iPhone, on an iPhone 7 or on an iPhone 8, okay, but if you're talking about the plus versions of these phones, and saying that you can't fit a 3.5 millimeter jack, you'd have a hard time convincing me of that. However, I suspect that one of the reasons that we do see some leftover space on the inside of any phone is because there's got to be a certain amount of airspace on the inside when it's generating heat. That's just my my guess, but I would imagine you can't have everything too tightly packed in there. Then again, we're talking about a water resistant phone, so there's not going to be a lot of air movement. So I don't know, maybe. They say that Apple didn't reach their sales goal. Excuse me. But I see iPhone 10 everywhere. I don't know what sales goals they were going for. John, I don't know. You know, obviously it's pretty hard for us to say just by talking to or seeing a small, you know, a pretty small sample of people. It's probably going to vary quite a bit from one location to the next. So, yeah, I don't know, because obviously they don't disclose that information also. And this is the thing about iPhone sales. You know, we do know that Apple had a very profitable fourth quarter in 2017, but they never really disclose exactly what they sold. You know, where did that profit come from? How many units of iPhone 10? How many iPhone 8? You know, unless you're on the inside, you really don't have access to that information. So I see the same thing. You know, I go out and I see people with iPhone 10s, at least the people who are walking around with their phones out where I can see them. It's very easy to recognize the notch, but I see a lot of people whose phones I don't know, you know, it's a mystery really as to what they're using. So that could be just based on observation, obviously, but you know, we're talking about the whole world. So I assume their plan was to sell out of iPhone 10s for a long period of time, and it doesn't sound like that happened, but that could also just be a lot of gossip. Of course, they reached profitability by selling those at that price point, but they missed their unit sales numbers expectations. You know, that's what all the news stories that I've read say also. They would agree with that. Who knows? Maybe the sales goal is somewhere near $1 trillion US. Probably. That is entirely possible, right? So we shall see. Again, I don't think it's time for anyone to panic about Apple in any way, but I am curious to know what's going to happen with the new design. You know, they're supposed to be launching 3 models this year, and we just get to wait and see until they start leaking that information, right? So here is the thing. We've got Android P coming out. I'm not sure why they went with that particular letter. I'm sure there's a reason, and you guys probably know more about it than I do. And I actually switched over to something different, but that's okay. We'll come back to Right to Repair in just a minute. So what do we get in Android P? We get indoor positioning with Wi-Fi RTT. So apparently this has been a challenge for a long time with Android to, I guess, figure out exactly where you are standing when you're indoors, because obviously you're running off of a network, and my assumption is it has a hard time pinning down your exact location. So Android P adds platform support for the IEEE 802.1MC Wi-Fi Trip Time RTT to let you take advantage of indoor positioning on your apps, which obviously, depending on what apps you're using, that could come in helpful. I'm sure there's some way. You know, the first one that comes to mind for me would be keeping track of employees or something like that as far as location goes, but I'm sure there's a reason why. And that's what a lot of these come down to is productivity. So yeah, I don't know if you read about it, but Amazon had some kind of deal like this where they were using like GPS location for their employees' locations inside the warehouse to keep track of where they're at, how fast they're moving, and that kind of stuff. So I'm sure there are quite a few different uses for this. It says that knowing the distance to 3 or more APs can calculate the device position within 1 to 2 meters. So if you really want to be stalked, I guess that's the way to do it, right? Also, display cutout support, and this is the ironic part about it. Android P will support the iPhone 10 notch, and then of course if there's no notch in the future, well then I suppose they spent a lot of time developing this version of Android for something that could potentially go away, which I think the odds are kind of low on that happening, but if it did, how ironic would that be? You know, Android goes, okay, all of our apps look screwed up because we had this notch in the iPhone 10, they fixed the problem, and I swear I would have to laugh if Apple just said, we're not going to have a notch anymore. Let's see. Oreo currently is P, what? Oreo currently next is P for something underscore dessert. I'm a little slow, Greg. You'll probably have to explain that to me in simple terms. I'm not sure what that means. Nice job on the yellow background for Android P. Oh, that's funny. You know, that was totally not even intentional, but yeah, okay. I guess it works, right? This is really off topic, but when you buy iPhone screw replacement with all the screws, does it come organized? And if not, how do you sort them? And no, John, to my dismay, they in fact do not come organized. In fact, it would probably be a little tough for me to grab it right now, but I just recently, let's see if we can fix this image. This thing will drive me nuts. I just recently got a screw set for iPhone 7, and I wish I had it within reach, but it is literally a tiny little baggie with a bunch of mixed up screws. So no to the first question. To the second one, how do you sort them out? And that is the difficult part. So fortunately, I only needed one tri-lobe screw for a home button out of this set. That was easy enough to find. But going through and organizing those things has always been a challenge. So back in the day, I mean, this is literally the only screw I've had to take out of that bag so far. But in prior models, what you'll find is that there are a number of screws that are pretty much identical, and as soon as you can locate those and put them together and take them out of the mix, that's going to you know, give you less to work with. But long story short, for me, it's under a microscope compared to an original screw that I'm trying to replace, figure out where it goes, and then if there's a number of those screws that are the same, you get to dig through that pile and start sorting them out. So, you know, in the beginning, it seems like a lot because you've got like 40 screws sitting there, but as you start separating the main ones, you know, you take out all the tri-lobe screws that go to the home button, take out all of the, obviously the pentalobe screws come away first, and then as you kind of go through and match them up, you have to have the correct screw on hand to figure out what that is, because there are, as you already know, there are so many that are almost identical to the point where the thread's the same size, but the length is just slightly like, you know, a fraction of a millimeter difference, and that can lead to trouble. So yeah, it's not fun. It sucks. I'm not a big fan of it. And when I open up a phone and one of the screws is backed out, I wonder if they shouldn't just start thread locking all those. I don't know how it happens. It tends to be mainly with people who do things like drive long distance, or when they put their phone on the dashboard inside of their car and it's bouncing around like nonstop as they drive. That's usually when we see it. When you go all the way back to like the iPhone 4 days and the iPhone 3GS, the way that vibrator was held in by a tiny little short screw, those things would come out all the time. If somebody had their phone set on silent, every time it rang, it was putting a little vibration into that screw, and those things would back out all the time. Man, that drove me nuts. It was such a horrible design. I'm glad that they fixed that. You know, it's unfortunate they had to create this Taptic engine that takes up so much room at the bottom of the phone, but it's definitely better than the old little spinning, rotating motor vibrators that they had built in there before. Android names their versions after desserts, with the current version is Oreo. Next version of Android in the next letter of the alphabet, aka P, for yet to be an announced dessert. Thank you. Okay, I knew that there was a dessert theme going on there. That's why I didn't get where the P came from. Android Popsicle, Android Pie. Okay, guys, thanks. So now I'm up to date. Now I understand how that works. So we had Oreo. We'll have P for pie or popsicle or whatever. What are they going to call Q? It's a dessert. Is there a dessert that starts with Q? Peanut butter cup. There you go. So what else do we have here on Android P? We have a multi-camera API. We have an image decoder for bitmaps and drawables, if that excites anyone. We have HDR, VP9 video, HEIF image compression and media APIs, which I assume is the same high efficiency image something or other that we had with the iPhone that drove me nuts because I couldn't get any of my photos off my phone. I will use Dropbox in the future. We're excited to add image encoding to the platform. HEIF is a popular format for photos and improves compression to save on storage and network data. Okay. With platform support on Android P devices, it's easy to send and utilize HEIF images. Okay, got that. Data cost sensitivity in Job Scheduler. I don't know the first thing about Job Scheduler, so I'm not going to tackle that one. Neural Networks API 1.1. This was introduced in Android 8.1 to accelerate on-device machine learning on Android. In Android P, it's expanding to improve added support for new ops, pad, batch to space, space to batch, ND. A lot of stuff that I don't think is going to be a big factor for most people. I could be wrong, but they're not mentioning anything here that sounds even remotely familiar. Autofill improvements, that's got to be good. Based on feedback from users and developers, fixing some bugs, includes new APIs that allow password managers to improve the autofill user experience, such as better dataset filtering, input sanitization, and compatibility mode. Open mobile API for NFC payments, and more security for apps and privacy for users. And this has got its whole separate deal, whole separate section of security features that are going to be developed or included in Android P. And one of them is going to be controlled access to your device camera, mic, and sensor. So with Android P, an app supposedly will not be able to access your camera or your microphone or most of the sensors while it's running in the background unless it is perfectly clear to you that it is doing so. And that is probably a good idea. I mean, obviously we should be reading all the terms and conditions before we install any applications, but I think a lot of that gets by a lot of people. I mean, I know that in many cases I have scrolled down to the bottom and clicked OK on so many things that I probably owe, I don't know, millions of dollars to some outrageous terms and conditions that I agreed to. But that's something I think that we really need to let people know. I'm not going to even bring up the little Facebook issue that we talked about because they're still denying that they monitor you through your microphone on your smartphone, but who knows. Android intelligence in your inbox. Upgrade your knowledge with the new Insider newsletter. That's an ad. Why am I reading that? Better encryption with network connections. Stronger protection from unsecure traffic. Better protection of your unique device identifier. A standardized UI for fingerprint authentication. User-facing warnings for outdated API use. These are all security features for Android P. So that seems to be a lot of what's going on with this new version of Android. When it's going to be available for what, I'm not 100% sure. But Android Pumpkin Pie coming this November. That would be perfect. They really should do that. There you go. Quaker Oats. We could do Quaker Oats for the Q. And that's not really a dessert though, Nate. I think they were saying that it's a dessert theme. So we've got to have a dessert that starts with Q. So that is my challenge to everyone on the chat. If you can think of a dessert that starts with Q, then we could start placing bets as to who gets it right. Because I think it's going to be difficult to come up with one for that. Did they reinvent Android yearly with each do they reinvent Android early with each version like iOS? Yes and no, says Real World. Android M, N, and O were all minor visual changes, but mainly stability and security updates. And we have a Wikipedia link for all of the Android updates. Cool. All right, so I do want to go back here. I skipped over this, and I want to show you. I am happy that, what is her name? Susan Talamantes Eggman has introduced a right to repair bill in California. So finally, and for the longest time, I thought California would be one of the first states that jumped on this. We have so much agriculture in the Central Valley that I've heard at one point in time that we literally produce the food for almost like half of the population of the entire country. So and this is the thing that gets overlooked, and we are in our world of technology and smartphones, and we see something like right to repair and immediately think that, hey, we should be able to fix our cell phones and our tablets and computers and stuff like this. But the issue, the whole problem here is much bigger than just the phone repair industry. This goes into all sectors of life. Anytime, and this is happening more and more, anytime manufacturers create something and build in planned obsolescence, and this is stated very clearly in this introduction to this bill. Manufacturers come up with something and figure out a way to design it so that you cannot repair it. And we could be talking about a $1,000 phone, okay, big deal. But we could also be talking about a $500,000 tractor that a farmer needs to use to I want to say gather his crops. I don't know the correct term. But when it comes to harvest time, they need to use their farm equipment. We have medical equipment that is in the tens of thousands of dollars that someone's life could depend on. And if it stops working and no one can fix it except for the manufacturer, imagine the situation that a hospital could end up in. So homes, there was actually a related article about another lawsuit where a bunch of homes were built and they were defective and they had problems and people couldn't, their homes were falling apart. They were going to be uninhabitable. And you can't wait for the person that you bought the home from to show up in court so that you can argue this out and decide whether or not they're going to rebuild your home. There's all these different areas where this legislation is going to affect way more people than just us. It's not just the small businesses that are working on phones. So I'm happy to see that this is happening. And I'm even happier that it's happening in my home state where I live. There are a number of other states throughout the country. And for anyone who is not already aware of this, if you're just visiting here, I urge you to take a look at this quickly. If you like having access to your electronics, and if you like to have a choice in the matter, if you feel like, hey, if something goes wrong with my iPhone, I want to take it to the Apple store, that is completely fine. You should always have that option if there's a store in your area. But what if you feel like you don't want to wait in their line, or somehow your warranty has become voided and you can't go to them? They won't give you the solution that you need for your problem. You say, hey, I need to get information off my phone. And they say, well, we'll replace the phone for you. And you lose everything that's stored on that device. You should have another option, and other people who are capable of bringing back that phone or tablet or computer or whatever it is to working condition at a fraction of the price of what the manufacturer is going to charge you. If you looked at any other industry, that's always going to be something that's available to a consumer. If you have an automobile, if you have a washer and dryer, if you have a refrigerator, you could name just about any appliance in your home up until recently, where if you said, hey, you know what? I need to get my kitchen sink fixed. You call up a plumber, he comes out, he has access to the information and the materials that he needs to perform that repair. Okay, theoretically, in the future, we're going to have smart devices all over the place. What happens if and when you buy this smart stove that you can tell to turn on and tell to turn off, and when you leave the house, if you're not sure if you shut it off, you can go into your phone and click it and it shuts off, and you go, you know what, I need to have this. This is what I want. I want all of my devices connected to my smartphone and the network at my home. And then after you buy them, you find out that no one can fix it except the company that you bought it from. So now you don't have a washer and dryer. You don't have an electronic lock on your front door. Your camera system doesn't work anymore. None of this stuff is functioning, and your only option is going back to the original manufacturer. And the reason I'm making this example is because this could really happen. As we look at things like phones and tablets and computers, these electronics are built in a way that there's proprietary software in many cases that prevents anyone else from servicing them. So if that spreads into other areas of our life, what if you couldn't change the oil on your car? What if you couldn't get the brakes done at your local mechanic and you had to go to the dealer? And if you've ever gone to a dealer to have your car serviced, the way that they typically operate is by hiring the person who can get the job done fastest so that they can maximize their profit, and they also charge you the highest bench rate available. Now, granted, they will use OEM parts, and that is another part of this whole argument. We need to have access to OEM parts without buying them off of the back of a truck in China, which is, in many cases, when we're buying OEM stuff, it's coming from the same place that the phone was manufactured, but we're not really able to buy it on the open market. Somehow, one way or another, it gets here. We will continue to be able to source parts to do the repairs that we do, but this should all be completely legitimate. We should have easy access to it, And for any company to say, I'm going to build something that no one else can fix but me, is ludicrous. On top of that, what blows my mind is that when you go on to forums, I was on a forum earlier today, which was filled with a lot of people who are Apple enthusiasts, and their reactions were just outrageous. I felt like I was talking to company employees for the most part, because the reactions were, oh, well, we sure don't want customers to be able to work on their own phones. They don't know what they're doing. They're going to cause batteries to explode. That's not even what this bill is about. This bill is about giving the information to capable third-party repair centers that can get your phone working again. So it's just nuts how poisoned the mindset of consumers has become when they are so loyal to any particular company that they're going to do whatever they think is best for the company, even going as far as placing that above their own needs or rights as a consumer. It blows my mind. Like, I just don't get it. But Kool-Aid if you like. So if you take a look at the site, it's repair.org. I know I always bring this up in every live stream. Today, I'm going to stay on it a little longer because of this new legislation that is being proposed in California, and I will make every effort I possibly can for this argument, representation, contacting these guys. In any case, if you scroll down and you go to this section that says Fight for Your Right to Repair, click on here where it says Take Action. It says Stand Up for Your Right to Repair. Scroll down and look at all these states that are proposing laws. Now, do you think that all of the politicians in all of these states in the country are just crazy, or they're just coming up with frivolous bills to publish just for no apparent reason? No, they actually understand what's going on and how crazy this is getting, and you can do something to help. If you go to your state, here's California, I'm going to click on that, and it gives you a form that you can fill out. Look, it even says, welcome back, Mike. They even recognize me, okay? Because I've already filled out this form once. It'll take a couple of minutes, and if you're interested in maintaining control over the products that you own, I encourage you to do this, and I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to keep going on and on about it all day, but I hope that everyone will at least take a look and consider signing up and letting people, especially if you're a registered voter, let them know how you feel about this. All right, let's get back to the chat. Sorry, I know I got on my high horse there for a minute, but this is really important. And now my display looks funny, but whatever. Where were we on the comments? It was everything more concise with the 2 and 4 series after the lollipop skipped me. Okay, so that was on the Android stuff. I think Mike should partner with another YouTuber channel called The Humble Mechanic, who also has issue with the difficulty in obtaining repair manuals for cars to discuss the right to repair bill. I will do that, Johnny. I will definitely look him up, and I'm going to say that again so that I'll remind myself when I'm listening to the playback, The Humble Mechanic, and we'll see what we can do. Nate, I don't know what that word is, but apparently Nate has found a dessert that starts with Q. Don't know. Okay, I can't even attempt to pronounce that. Android quesadillo. It's a Latin American take on the flan. Is that what it is? Okay, there you go. It's too much apple Kool-Aid. I didn't say it. Someone else did. But, whatever it is, there's definitely too much of it, and it's unfortunate if you like your operating system, if you like a brand, cool. If you want to wear that brand on your shirt or your shoes or your jacket or your bumper sticker on your car, that's cool too. But when you get to the point where your judgment becomes blurred and you think, well, I want to do what's best for the company that I support without taking into consideration your own rights as a consumer, I don't know where to go from there. I don't know what more I can do to convince people. I have this conversation with anyone that will listen because it's just getting out of hand. But hopefully it will stop soon. Hopefully one of these states will come through because it really takes a starting point. It takes one bill to get passed. And if it were California, considering the population in California, what is Apple going to do? Just not cell phones in California? That's not going to happen. And all the time where, the one argument that came up here in one of these articles was that there are so many software developers, and obviously Apple is located in California. So their argument is, and they have been spending tons of money to lobby against the right to repair. So that should tell everyone something. If we have an idea where we say we should be able to fix an appliance or a device that we buy from a company, and that company is willing to spend, I would imagine, ridiculous amounts of money to stop that law from being passed because they don't want us to have the information that we need to make those repairs. And their argument being that hackers are going to be able to have access to information that will jeopardize your security and or your privacy on your device if we release schematics and parts and anything else that goes into these phones. If that's the only argument that you have, then I would respond with a Steve Jobs style answer. If your problem is that people are suing to get access to the information that they need to repair their devices, and your excuse for not providing that is security, then I think you need to work on better security. There you go. I think those are approximately the same types of words that someone like Steve Jobs would have used to overcome that problem. Fix it. Just build better security. We don't have to worry about it anymore. If having access to a screen or a charge port or a camera or any other modular component that we can replace inside of a phone, if having access to a schematic to know the location, not even the function, not the software, just the location of the same stuff that's been mapped out by people in China that we have access to anyways, if you really think that's going to make or break you, then there's a very weak, you're operating on a very weak business model of some sort, because it doesn't make any sense. The arguments are just ridiculous. And then when the second argument I heard was that if people had access to understand how to work on their own microwaves, they might hurt themselves. How can you say that, I promise guys, I'll get off this topic in just a second, but how can you say that having access to plans to repair anything is a good reason not to let people have access to that? That would be like saying, have you looked at the number of people who have injured themselves when they change a tire? Therefore, we need to build lug nuts that prevent the average consumer from being able to remove them from the car. That's the same type of argument you're using. It doesn't make any sense. Put me in a room with someone who will listen and who has some authority to make a decision as to whether this bill advances or not, and I will cut this down to a clear, concise statement in a couple of paragraphs that hopefully anyone can understand. That will be my goal. Anyways, back to everything else. Be like us. Test all of the phone ecosystem so you can realize how awesome Windows phones are until you want to download an app. Ah, man. I love Windows. It's too bad they suck. It's too bad they're gone. Oh, Wayne Taylor, and I want to say John Cassidy, aren't you also in Australia? Is it just Wayne or is it both of you? I don't remember. Repairing is a physical thing. Security is a virtual thing. Two different takes on the same issue. Exactly. That was my point as well. One of my points. Let's see. So let's go to something else here. Let's talk about, we did Android P. What am I missing out? We did Women's Day. Don't forget Women's Day, you guys. You don't want to be in trouble for that. Did you know that Blackberry is suing Facebook over their messaging technology? I don't know if this is, I don't know, like, apparently Blackberry has like 1 billion patents. Let's see, I looked them up. They have 40,000 global patents. 40,000 global patents. Probably not at their high point right now. And I would question why. I mean, obviously, if someone takes your intellectual property away, you should go after them and try to get it back or try to get some compensation for it. But apparently, BlackBerry is suing Facebook. I don't know where this is going to go, or if it's going to make any difference, but I feel bad for BlackBerry. Again, one less competitor in the market that it would be nice to have around, but I think they're going to be gone pretty soon. And I feel like I might have skipped over something here. So let me go back to my list. No, I think that was it. I think I got through most of the important stuff. All right, friends, Women's Day. Okay, I'll avoid them all. Well, you can't get in trouble if you don't see them. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's okay to celebrate Women's Day. You know, there's a lot of people that are very sensitive to anything that is restricted to one gender, or should I say gender? I don't even know if you can say gender anymore. I think they have different words for it now, but you got to be careful with it. So I assume that I should say for anyone who's celebrating Women's Day, happy Women's Day, and for everyone else, just ignore that. All right, so I think we had one other thing here, and that was mainly BlackBerry. And I don't know where this is going to go or what it means or what the whole idea is behind this. Followed years of negotiation, BlackBerry has an obligation to shareholders to pursue appropriate legal remedies, which makes sense because if you're a stockholder in BlackBerry, they are losing value because Facebook is taking their messaging intellectual property or something along those lines. I don't know. I don't know. But I do know this. I wanted to try something today and see if it works. So for you guys who are in Australia, let's give this a shot and see what happens. Just as a test, yes, it does. It works. I didn't think that it would, but I wanted to try it. So to all my Australian friends, I thought that this was the least I can do. So let's go to this one. Arizona. This is a trippy one, guys, and this is something that I am absolutely open to opinions on. Is encryption method patentable? Don't give up telltale. Look for vulnerability. That, Johnny, I don't know. So Johnny Chang asked, is encryption method patentable by definition? And by doing so, don't give out a telltale to look for a vulnerability. That I would wonder. I don't know. That was his New Zealand flag. Did I just give you the wrong flag? Are you serious? Well, now I feel ridiculous, man, because I can't tell you how much I had to go through to make that work, and then I put the wrong flag on the screen. See, Google led me astray. Sorry about that, guys. Let's see if we can fix that for you. Let's go back to this, get rid of that, and I'm going to see. Are you... I was going to say, are you sure that's the wrong flag? Obviously, you would know. Why did it give me that, then? It gave me a New Zealand flag. What? Okay, why does every flag look like the New Zealand flag, then? Literally every image that I'm seeing right now when I look for Australia looks like that flag. So my apologies, but I cannot apparently find the correct Australian flag. Oh, you are messing with me. Okay, thank you. Man. It's alright. It wouldn't be the first mistake that I've made, obviously. But today, other than my pre-roll video looking really weird, I haven't had any major screw-ups yet. I'm glad you have a sense of humor, though. Alright, so here's the trippy thing, guys. And I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more of this and talking a lot more about this in the near future. Arizona has laid down the rules as to how they are going to be able to operate self-driving cars in the state. They are saying that at this point in time, you just need to have a registered car for the most part, and they can operate on Arizona roads. Now, what I don't understand is that they said that they have a plan for how to deal with robocars, but when I read this article the first time, it sounded like you could operate the car without anyone behind the wheel, nobody inside the car. But I think that might be mistaken, because today I got another notification saying that Utah will probably be the first state that goes full-on driverless cars, automated, expected to become legal in the near future, which is pretty trippy. Now, Uber has been operating trucks, apparently. Let me see if I can find the rest of the information here. Uber has been operating trucks. Gosh darn it. Why did that not? Oh, I know why. Try using a Windows keyboard with an Apple machine. So in 2016, the transportation touted the rules of release, blah, blah, blah. Part of what makes Arizona a place for Uber and other companies to test autonomous vehicle technology is that there are no special permits or licensing required. So apparently there's a new order coming out, and if the person or company fails to submit a written statement that a vehicle adheres to all of the new rules, I don't know what the A stands for, but the Department of Transportation Director has the authority to immediately issue a cease and desist order, blah, blah, blah. But I swear I read something here a minute ago where they said that Uber was operating trucks. Yeah, so we've got Uber and Waymo vehicles operating in Arizona with safety drivers. So they have a car, they have a person in the car apparently to take over in case something happens. And they're saying that the self-driving technology enhances the abilities of those drivers. They have had 3 collisions, but so far, or they have had 3 accidents, but apparently 2 of them were intentionally caused by people outside of the driverless cars. I guess they didn't like the idea of it, but you know, like it or not, it's coming. We're going to have vehicles that drive themselves, I would imagine, everywhere in the near future. And I think the big question here really is just the ethical part of making a decision when it comes to the car is going to end up running over one person or another, or the driver, or the people are in the car are at risk, and how do you weigh that against the risks of injury to other people on the road? And really, with that said, this has always been the argument behind this. If we have automated cars that can drive, but we still have hazardous road conditions, we have people on the street driving that make mistakes, we have all these things that can happen and could potentially put that car in a position where it has to choose choice A or choice B, and both of them result in injury to someone, right? And the question has always been, who is really qualified? What sort of artificial intelligence is qualified, and how would it make the decision as to choose which is the lesser of the two, more dangerous or the worst consequences? And that's the thing that people have struggled with. And it kind of occurred to me recently that when it comes down to it, if you are in a car driving, you are certainly not going to be able to make as much of an informed decision in a split second as a machine would be able to. Now, I'm not saying that means the machine is always going to make the correct decision, but I think that it means, one, that when most people are driving, self-preservation is probably almost instinctual, if that makes sense. So if there's a collision that's about to occur where that you're going to run into another car or a brick wall or something else that's going to cause you bodily harm, I think that, in that half a second that it takes to hit the brakes or turn the steering wheel or anything along those lines, most likely you're going to make the decision that protects you and the passengers in your car. Where, right or wrong, it seems like a machine, if it has access to information such as the number of passengers in your car and weighs that against the potential damage to whatever else it is that, it has to choose between colliding with, it's probably going to look at something like, okay, 3 people here, 5 people there. The correct decision is to avoid a collision with 5 people rather than 3, wouldn't you think? Whereas, the other thing is that when you're in that situation and you have to make that decision, we probably don't always make the right choice. So maybe avoiding the collision overall provides more of a benefit to everyone than having a human driver behind the wheel. Because if everything's working properly, obviously the whole weak link here would be either the programming or something that a human did, something that we built, or an adverse road condition that was unforeseen that would cause it to make the incorrect decision, if that makes sense. What do you guys think about that? If it gets to the point where there are driverless cars all over the road, is this something that people are just going to eventually accept because they don't really have a choice? Or are we going to see some sort of rebellion like we did with Google Glass, where people go around and try to sabotage self-driving cars because they don't want it to happen? Is that going to slow it down? Or is there going to be, obviously at some point there's going to be a major malfunction somewhere where something's going to happen and people are going to say, this is why we shouldn't have self-driving cars. But, with that said, I don't think that right now is a good idea to get into truck driving school or to invest in a taxi company or anything like that. Not even to mention Uber, of course. So let's take a look at these comments. Oh, and by the way, someone else had pointed out last week after the stream that we can actually record these comments rather than having them on the stream here. And unfortunately, when I go back to edit this video and take off that little introduction at the part, that deletes that functionality. So I don't have the access to the comments anymore down when you scroll below the, you don't have the chat. You don't have access to the chat when you scroll down below the video or wherever it ends up showing up. So I have to choose between one of those two. And right now I'd really rather edit out that little intro part for 10 minutes because I think that anyone watches this replay doesn't really need to see that first 10 minutes. So until I come up with a better solution, I'm going to keep the chat here on the screen. But I'm always welcoming suggestions here. Talking about... All right, Wayne, I owe you one for that, but you did get me. Talking about autopiloted cars, there was some news related to some bug in the Tesla system. Interesting. There was a bug in the Tesla rocket too, because apparently it ended up in the wrong orbit, from what I've been told, or it will. Self-driving cars. Did you bring this up for Women's Day? Damn, self-driving cars will save a lot of lives. I am not going to even touch that one, Wayne, but that's funny. Winnebago and cruise control for many years ago. You know, I always wondered if that was an urban legend or not. But I remember reading that. If anyone hasn't already heard this story before, if you look it up, they talk about a couple. I want to say they were like senior citizens, and they had bought a big Winnebago to travel the country, and supposedly set the cruise control and got up and walked away from the steering wheel, and you know, eventually ended up going off of the freeway, obviously, because it drifted at a certain point in time. So I wonder if that was actually true or not, because you want to believe that people aren't that challenged, but maybe it really did happen. I don't know. I feel like you never hear about the choice A or choice B car accidents in the news. So is it a real concern? I don't know. And that's a good question. It seems to be the argument that people bring up whenever you talk, when you talk about, you get a lot of people who say, well, I don't trust self-driving cars. And we say, well, we've already proven they are safer than human drivers. Well, yeah, but I don't trust them. Well, okay. Obviously that's opinion, and that's based, I think, on feeling and being comfortable with things the way they are right now and not wanting to accept the future. I get that. But there is also often that moral argument presented as to whether a machine will ever reach a point where it can make a decision that a human would make. And if you haven't already heard the paperclip analogy, this is another one of the popular ones for artificial intelligence that they use. And that is, if you have a machine and you give it simple instructions like build as many paperclips as you possibly can, and in order to do that, it performs an action that is in some way harmful to humans. And it doesn't have to mean it runs over a human in the process of getting to the materials that it needs for the paperclip, but it can mean that some other action that machine takes doesn't take into consideration the damage that it could potentially do to people. Because obviously we're not at that point in artificial intelligence where machines really can make the same, understand the same things that we do, at least not yet. So when you tell when you tell this machine to build as many paperclips as you can per hour, and that has an adverse effect on humanity in some way, unless you build in all of the parameters necessary, which would be, a ridiculously involved task, something that I don't think that we'll even approach in the near future, that computer may take some actions that are harmful to people. And that's the main concern. That's why we're worried about Boston Dynamics and Terminator dogs and stuff like that. So is it even an issue? Maybe, maybe not, but it is certainly it's certainly a point of contention that people use when they talk about self-driving cars, and it's certainly the first go-to for anyone who is opposed to them, is how can a car make a decision that a human would make in that same situation? And if you could imagine, if you or someone, and I hope this never happens to anyone, but if someone was injured by a self-driving car, that would potentially change the way that they think about it, and that would be understandable, right? I mean, we see this happen all the time. Someone in a plane crash probably has a whole different view of airplanes and airlines and airline safety and stuff like that. So if something bad happens and it involves a self-driving car, I think that's where we're going to see people say, well, this is why we shouldn't have them. A human would have done something different in that situation. But the bottom line is, by a huge margin, a self-driving car is safer under most circumstances than a human driver is, which is why I don't think that that's really going to matter. It might be important, it might be an issue, but I don't think it's going to change the outcome. At least that is my prediction. So I would buy stock in a self-driving car company if I had that option right now. Does someone in the chat recall the pilot episode for Almost Human? Okay, I'll leave that one. I don't know what Almost Human is. Sounds interesting, though. You guys come up with these references to movies and series on Netflix I need to go watch now. Well, I think they took the concept from iRobot, but this is about treating sentient robots with the same regard as humans. And what's interesting about that is, what'd you do there, Johnny? Is that a link? Let's see what Johnny put on there. What is that, Johnny? It came through all... is that actually a link? Because it doesn't look like it. So I just read something here about taking the concept from iRobot, which is another interesting one. And I would assume that would be at the top, hopefully, of, you know, with a few exceptions, of course, but at the top of any list of artificial intelligence design should be rule number 1, or however they described, Isaac Asimov described it in iRobot, was that, you know, 1, never harm a human, right? Wasn't that number 1? And number 2 was always obey humans or something along those lines. But that, again, boils down to the artificial intelligence ability to understand everything that could potentially be harmful to humans. So yes, you could tell a robot that has guns strapped to it to only shoot at the enemy, which, you know, there's another gray area, and 100% guaranteed application of artificial intelligence is going to be military. So that's going to be another situation where, you know, how do you tell a drone, make sure you don't go in, well, collateral damage, right? But how do you know that you target the right people? But when we talk about self-driving cars or anything else that could potentially harm people, it really comes down to them being able to understand that one of their actions could cause harm. And I think that was one of the things that, you know, if you've read iRobot, you know, back then it was probably hard to imagine all of the potential implications. I know that the spirit of that intention was in the right place, but there are so many variables that would have to be taken into consideration. We need some serious intelligence to make that decision. Let's see, who gets the speeding tickets? Well, Wayne, they're not supposed to speed. So if they do, that is a good question. What happens if potentially a self-driving car does commit a moving violation? I don't know. That is a good question. Is it the responsibility of the owner? And what if there's nobody in the car? What if it is just the car? And funny but legit question. Can you get a DUI in a self-driving car? I'm hoping not. I'm actually looking forward to the point in time where no one ever gets a DUI, because no one ever has to drive intoxicated, never has an excuse to, and is never tempted to, because you just hop in a car that drives itself. So I would think no. Once it gets to the point where it is legal for the cars to operate 100% autonomously, if that's a word. So there are several states. I want to say California is one of them. I believe Florida. There's a whole bunch of states where you can have self-driving vehicles, but you've got to have a safety driver. So you've got someone who's got to be capable of taking over, sort of like you would with a provisional license. But when it gets to the point where self-driving vehicles are 100% legal on their own, I would assume that you could be inside of the vehicle at any level of intoxication without having to worry about that. Hopefully. I don't know. It's a good question, though. Because really, if not, it kind of defeats part of the point, right? Self-driving cars will also destroy 50% of YouTube. What? No more women driver video channel. Oh, jeez. Women driver video channels. I've never seen that. I heard about the Winnebago story when I was an EMT. I heard an old woman was driving along, put the cruise control on, and went to take a nap or something. She sued, and they gave her a new one. Did you guys find a link to that? Is that what you're putting in here? Because I am highly skeptical about that. Super, super skeptical. You know, it's weird, Johnny. You tried to post that link, and it asked me if I could approve it, and I approved it, and then it came up all goofy like that. So I don't know what happened there. Nate's got a post for you. Damn. It'll be LGBTQI and A for Android. Uber's a thing and DUIs still happen. Got a point there. Again, last week's X-File. Oh, you know what? Greg, you told me I'm going to have to start recording the X-Files because I don't think that I have it on demand, and I need to see 2 episodes now that you already talked about. There was one single case of an industrial robot in a car manufacturing factory charged for committing murder. Are you talking about the X-Files, or are you talking about something that really happened here? I can't open YouTube links because obviously I can't play them here while we're streaming. As much as I would like to, it would actually probably work, and then my video would be demonetized and I'd get a community strike, or I don't know, whatever else it is that they're doing now. So that's the big news. We are looking forward to the Galaxy S9 on March 16th will be the release date. Anyone planning to buy one of those? I'm going to look it up. I'm going to have to look this up. There's so many urban legends, and so many of them sound real. And maybe it is. If that is true, that concerns me. People that'll really think that they can just put their car on cruise control and hop out. Let's see. Did I have anything else for you guys today? I have... what do I have? I've got a couple projects coming up that I plan to do. I don't know if I can do it live though, because I only have one HDMI input on my Windows computer that I finally got Windows 10 for, so that this silly thing hopefully will work. But that means I guess I get to choose between having a microscope camera, having a camera facing me, or having a camera facing the project that I'm doing. So I'm trying to, I don't know how these guys are doing it. They must be using a USB camera to make it happen. Unfortunately, I went with the DSLR option. So one way or another, I should have a iPhone 6 backlight repair, and I've also got, what else do I have? I have another tablet charge port, I think, coming in tomorrow. Then I'm going to try to record. That's my plan. I plan to buy and review. Not sure if I should get the S9 or S9 Plus. Currently using the S8 Plus. All right, everyone. So Real World Review will have a Galaxy S9 review on his channel shortly after it's released, I would imagine. I'll be looking forward to that. And I think that's it. Friends, thank you so much for joining me once again. And you know, I was actually going to show you this t-shirt that Repair X sent me, but I'll do that next week because it's not t-shirt weather here yet. Try using something as a KVM to have more than one video input. Yeah, you know, Johnny, I can do that. I'm really kind of looking for like an HDMI mixer, if that makes sense. So with the KVM, and I've actually got a switch. I have a switch that allows me to select HDMI inputs, but I want to be able to have like 2 or 3 going at the same time. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. In any case, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to take off. I got stuff on my thing I got to work with. Nate, good to see you. Glad that you could make it as well. And let's see. Yeah. Oh, you'll get it done this month for sure. Now there's pressure on. Everyone's looking forward to your review. So I'm sure you'll get it done. Anyways, friends, I'll be back on Monday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And again, next Thursday, I believe we will have a guest. Thought we were going to have one today, and then we kind of got our wires crossed. So I'm attempting to get that lined up next time. And I will be contacting quite a few people that you suggested, see who we can get on here. So Thursdays, I think we're going to stick with for now. Eventually, I might switch this over, but whatever. Everybody said they didn't care, so I'm going to leave it as is for the moment. My link to the best women drivers. You're going to get me in trouble, Wayne, but I'm going to have to look at your link for scientific purposes just to see what you're talking about, or I'll call it research. All right, everyone, I will see you next time. Have a great rest of your week, and that's it.